Good evening. How's everybody doing? Great to be learning with you on a Monday, Yom Sheni. Let's light up the darkness. Who's in the house on a Monday? Stephen in New Hampshire, Joseph in Sierra Nevada, Yehud in South Carolina, Melissa in Great Neck, Guy in Ohio, Sharon in New Jersey, Nancy in North Carolina, Lorraine in Texas, Bill in Missouri, Joe in the Inland Empire, Shandora in the Bronx, Belle in Texas. Thanks, Sal and Nina, that in the middle of all your work, you still prepare and teach. Am Yisrael Chai. Amen. Thank you so much, Belle. Renee in Indiana, Lucy in Minnesota, Roger in Philly, Glenn in Grand Rapids, Michigan, Aoife in Florida, Mickey in New Jersey, Alan in New York City, Ilanit in Silver Spring Heim in Florida, Mickey, AMC, Cherry Hill in Philadelphia. You going to see Guns N' Moses, or did you already? Let us know. Ilanit, hoping the film had a great opening weekend. L in Southern California. Yeah, it had a great opening weekend. You know, it could have, obviously could always sell more tickets. It would be good. I mean, it's an independent movie up against behemoths in the marketplace with massive marketing budgets. So the challenge for us is getting the word out, and that the word should be out in the places where there are theaters, because we're not in every community. We're basically in 18 markets, and we were in 78 theaters this past weekend. We're going to lose a few. We're going to gain a few. We had some theaters that were super strong, did really well. But the most important stat, and this is great, the most important stat is that on Sunday, our ticket sales went up. Right now in Box Office Mojo, there's like an estimate for Sunday that's going to get replaced. We actually went up. And if you look at every other movie, every single other movie that's in the marketplace right now, their sales went usually from Friday, well, from the one that matters, from Saturday to Sunday, always goes down. A lot of them go down from Friday to Saturday. But from Saturday to Sunday, for sure, always goes down. Every other movie, ours went up. Went up a little bit from Friday to Saturday, went up more into Sunday. And that means that we are at the beginning. We're just at the beginning of this process. It is a word-of-mouth movie. People are loving it. The Rotten Tomatoes number dropped. Nina and I were really moved. We were really, really moved. We always hoped, we could tell because we tested it, because we traveled with it at festivals, because so many people have enjoyed the movie. So we thought it should have a good audience number on Rotten Tomatoes. And when it finally came out, it's a 97. It's like, people really love this movie. Lots of audience reviews. People are just getting behind it. We're just so moved by that. But again, we need the word of mouth. We absolutely need the word of mouth. So if you've seen the movie, please send gunsandmosesmovie.com. Send the website so they can see the trailer and get tickets to 5 people, if not 10 people, and tell them, I saw this movie. This movie's awesome. You got to see this movie. Or I'm dying to see this movie. It's not in my city yet, but it is in your city. Make sure you see it this week, this week 1, right? That we still have weekend 1, and now we're in week 1. These midweek plays absolutely makes a huge difference if you go Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. We're going to find out what our theater list is going to be next weekend pretty soon. But the more sales, the better. The more people hear about it, the better. The more people comment, on our social media, hey, I want to see this movie. Or send us a contact form. There's a contact form at gunsandmosesmovie.com saying, when is this movie going to come to, wherever you live, the name of your town? We're going to forward all that information to our distributors so that they can share it with the exhibitors. And with God's help and yours, this movie is going to just get out and be big, because there's definitely the demand of the people. The people want this movie. America's falling in love with Rabbi Mo, and we're beside ourselves. It's so great and so moving to us. Okay, now let's shift gears and learn some Torah, because above all, Torah. Okay, we are holding on page 35a here in Tractate Avoda Zara, the 27th volume of the Talmud, continuing our discussion of Mishnah number 4, which with God's help we're going to wrap up today and begin Mishnah number 5 here in chapter 2 of Avoda Zara. Remember, in case you're new, what we're talking about here is distancing ourselves from idolatry. Idolatry is a major sin, not just for Jews, but for all people. All people are prohibited in the sin of idolatry. Okay, about 1/3 of the way down on page 35a. The Mishnah taught that Rabbi Yehoshua diverted Rabbi Yishmael's attention to another matter, and he began discussing the verse, "For your love is better than wine." Sounds familiar? It's from Shir Shirim, Song of Songs, chapter 1, verse 2. The Gemara asks, what is the meaning of the verse, "For your love is better than wine"? Dodecha, your love. When Rav Dimi came from Eretz Yisrael, from the land of Israel, to the Jewish community in Bavel in Babylonia, Babylonia. Why did I lose my place in the middle of Babylonia? He said, the congregation of Israel said before the Holy One, blessed be He, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, blessed be He, Master of the universe, the statements of your beloved ones, Dodecha, same idea, your love, i.e., the sages, is what is meant here in this interpretation, are more pleasant to me than the wine of the written Torah itself. Right? Very interesting interpretation. Why would that be? Right? God wrote the Torah. God dictated the Torah to Moses. Moses set it down, but he was taking dictation from God. So why would God say that the statements of the sages are more dear to me than what is in the written Torah? Well, I'm not going to put I'm not going to, guess what God would think or say. The sages know more about that than I do. But, just to hazard a guess what this means to me, there's what I write, and I care about what I write. I care even more about what Nina writes. She writes almost everything. That's on accidentaltalmudist.org. But even more than what we write, aren't we all moved, if we're blessed to have children, by what our children write, right? And so if we can, get them on the right path and say, well, this is what's important in life. These are the values I've received, from my parents or, from God who invented these values. And then our children take it seriously. And it's not that they're improving on what God wrote. It's that they're taking it in and then offering something back to God. That's why it would be so dear to God, right? It's like a gift from God's children to God. And the Gemara asks, what is different about this verse that led Rabbi Yehoshua to ask Rabbi Yishmael a question specifically with regard to it? And Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi said, and some say Rabbi Shimon bar Abi said, he chose the verse because he sought to tell him a message that can be derived from the beginning of the verse. Quote, let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth. Song of Songs 1:2. So in essence, Rabbi Yehoshua said to him, Yishmael, my brother, press your lips one to the other, and do not be so hasty to retort, i.e., do not persist in your question. It's very interesting. He's actually telling him, hey, take it in. Take it in. Don't just keep asking questions. Yes, your curiosity is your most valuable asset. And the fact that you keep challenging and asking questions is a fantastic, a wonderful gift that you have, and it causes you to bring down more Torah, to unearth more Torah, to bring more Torah concepts, from the hidden realm into the revealed realm. Fantastic. But there's also a time to be quiet. There's also a time to be quiet and take it in. The Gemara asks, what is the reason Rabbi Yehoshua instructed Rabbi Yishmael not to question him further. So Ula says, and some say Rav Shmuel bar Abba says, the ordinance prohibiting the cheese of idolaters, that's where we were yesterday, was a new decree, and therefore one does not scrutinize its origins. What? The Gemara asks, what? What was in fact the reason for the sage's decree prohibiting the cheese of idolaters? And Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi says, and Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi says, it was due to the concern for puncturing, i.e. the concern that a snake might have deposited its venom in the cheese, as the idolaters are not assumed to be careful about this. Yesterday we were talking about totally different reasons, right? Why is the cheese of idolaters prohibited? One reason is that it might be that the enzyme that's used to make it curdle, the rennet, might come from an animal that was used for idolatry, and therefore any part of that animal, even that stomach enzyme, would be prohibited, and then any cheese that was created using that enzyme would be prohibited. A different reason would be that we're concerned that an animal enzyme that comes from meat should not be mixed with dairy. Now there, not really, right? Because we've said that enzyme is not really meat. Nevertheless, we want to be careful if that comes from an animal that might have been used for idolatry. Is there a reason to suspect that it might have been used for idolatry? All these other reasons that we discussed yesterday. Here's something totally different. That maybe the idolaters were not careful enough about keeping the cheese basically hygienically covered up and safe from having some kind of poisonous deposit left on it. One example being from a snake. The Gemara comments, but if so, let Rabbi Yehoshua simply say to Rabbi Yishmael, it is prohibited due to the concern for puncturing. Why did he choose to avoid answering? And the Gemara explains, Rabbi Yehoshua reasoned in accordance with the statement of Ula. As Ula said, when the sages decreed a decree in the West, in Eretz Yisrael, they would not reveal the reason behind it until 12 months of the year had passed, lest there be a person who does not agree with it and will come to treat it with contempt. It's very interesting, this whole idea. Here, I think we're getting a little bit of an insight into the sages as policymakers, right? The idea that very often rabbinic ordinances are what? It's a protection that the sages are issuing as a fence around the Torah so that people don't come to violate biblical laws, right? Rabbinical ordinances, their basic purpose is to protect the people from coming to violate biblical laws. But as we've seen that certain ordinances, if the people aren't going to follow it, if the sages are concerned that it's an ordinance that the people won't follow, they won't issue it, right? Because they don't want to create a situation where there's going to be contempt for the ruling of the sages. Here, there's this idea that there needs to be a certain, almost mystique, right, around the sages. Now, they're very transparent in that they record all of their debates and how they come to conclusions. But really, they're doing that so that their rulings are understood by the people who have the experience, the depth, the vast knowledge. In other words, their fellow sages, both in their own generation and subsequent generations, to understand how they arrive at these rulings. And there are times when those rulings it's difficult. It's very difficult to go through the step-by-step process to arrive at the ruling. And somebody who doesn't have that kind of training and mental capacity might just say, oh, this is ridiculous. This is ridiculous. They're making it so hard. I can't even understand how they got there. And they're explaining it to me, but I can't follow the reasoning. And then that person actually gets distanced from the Torah because he doesn't trust the sages, right? So there's a certain amount of mystique that is necessary. You would think that what builds trust is transparency. And in general, that's true. But there are certain situations where the sages need to say, we've worked this out. Take this on. It's a law from the sages. We still have that today. I mean, when one of the great rabbis of the generation, a gadol d'or, of this generation, issues a ruling, we follow it because he's the great rabbi of the generation. And sometimes we only come to understand why he issued that ruling once it's in place and operating. He had the foresight to see how it would work in the generation. We might not until it's been operating for 12 months, as described here. Rabbi Yirmiyah would ridicule Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi's explanation that the prohibition was due to concern for puncturing. It's like, that's not the reason we would prohibit the cheese of idolaters. If that is so, dry cheese should be permitted. I guess because snakes won't deposit their venom there. And likewise, aged cheese should be permitted. As Rabbi Hanina says, with regard to exposure, a dry substance is permitted, even if it was originally in the form of an uncovered liquid, because a snake's venom does not let it dry, i.e. congeal. And an aged liquid is permitted, as a snake's venom does not let it age, as it causes it to spoil instead. So the Gemara presents two alternative reasons for this decree of the sages. Rabbi Hanina says the cheese is prohibited because it is not possible for it to have been made without containing particles of non-kosher milk. And Shmuel says the cheese is prohibited because it is curdled with the skin of the stomach of neveila. That's what we were getting at yesterday. The alternative reason, one idea was that the animal was used in idolatry. The other is that the enzyme used to curdle the milk into cheese came from a neveila. Because it was the property of an idolater, he would not slaughter the animal in a kosher manner. So can we extract this enzyme from a neveila, from the carcass of a kosher animal that was not slaughtered in a kosher manner? That's another reason to object and say that we're going to prohibit that cheese. And the Gemara comments, Shmuel's statement indicates that only the skin of the animal's stomach is prohibited, whereas the contents of the stomach, i.e. the rennet itself, is permitted. And the Gemara asks, and did Shmuel actually say this? But didn't we learn in a Mishna, tractate Chulin 116a, with regard to the stomach contents of an animal slaughtered by an idolater and the stomach contents of a neveila, each of these is prohibited. And we discussed it and asked, why does the Mishnah mention both an animal slaughtered by an idolater and a neveila? Is that to say that an animal slaughtered by an idolater is not a neveila? Right? If you have to mention both an animal slaughtered by an idolater and a neveila, well, are you saying that there's some animal that's slaughtered by an idolater that's not a neveila? Why would an idolater ever have an animal slaughtered in a proper kosher manner? By mentioning what I just said. So in answer to this difficulty, Shmuel says the Mishnah is in fact teaching a single law, which is that the stomach contents of an animal slaughtered by an idolater are considered to be like stomach contents of an animal, of a neveila, and are therefore prohibited, right? It's the same reasoning and therefore prohibited in both cases. Earlier, Shmuel asserted that only the physical skin of an animal's stomach is prohibited, which indicates that the contents would be permitted. In his explanation of the Mishnah in Chulin, Shmuel posits that the stomach contents of a neveila are prohibited, and since any animal slaughtered by an idolater would be a neveila, then the rennet is prohibited, and therefore the cheese would be prohibited that's made with that rennet. Now, the Gemara explains that this is not difficult, that there's different and possibly contradictory explanations of Shmuel. Now on page 35b, here with regard to the Mishnah tractate Chulin, Shmuel's comment reflects the explanation of Rabbi Yehoshua before Rabbi Yehoshua's retraction of the assertion that it is prohibited to derive benefit from the stomach contents of a neveila. There, with regard to the Mishnah in Avoda Zara, Shmuel's statement is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehoshua after his retraction of that claim. And although this indicates that the Mishnah in Chulin presents an outdated ruling that was later rescinded, a Mishnah does not move from its place. In other words, once it has been taught in a certain manner, the Tana of that Mishnah, the author of that Mishnah, will not change the text of a Mishnah in order to reflect a change of opinion so as to avoid confusion. We'll have to know that that Mishnah was later superseded, but since it was authored and published, so to speak, as a Mishnah, it remains on the books. The Gemara suggests additional reasons for the decree of the sages. Rav Malkiah says in the name of Rav Ada Barahava The cheese is prohibited because idolaters smooth its surface with pig fat. Right? So any product of such a prohibited substance as pig for a Jew, any product that results from it, like this cheese, right? So cheese that's made with rennet that came into contact with pig fat, that cheese is definitely not going to be permitted. Rav Chisda offers a different reason. It is because they curdle it with vinegar. Where does vinegar come from in the Talmud? From wine. What's the problem with wine? Wine of idolaters may well have been used for idolatry. Therefore, any wine and its vinegar are prohibited. Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak says it is because they curdle it with sap that is subject to the prohibition against consuming the fruit of a tree during the first 3 years of its planting. Orla. Right? So a Jew cannot use the produce of a fruit tree during its first 3 years, and idolaters are not bound by those rules, so they might have used fruit or sap of this tree from the first 3 years of its growth in producing this other product like cheese, and therefore that would render it prohibited for a Jew. The Gemara comments, you may even say that the statement is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehoshua, who disagrees with the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer, as Rabbi Yehoshua disagrees with Rabbi Eliezer only with regard to the sap of a branch. But with regard to the sap of a fruit, Rabbi Yehoshua concedes that it is prohibited as orla if it comes from the first 3 years of that tree. The Gemara adds, and this is in accordance with that which we learned in the continuation of that Mishnah. Rabbi Yehoshua said, I heard explicitly that with regard to one who curdles cheese with the sap of the leaves and the sap of the roots of an orla tree, the cheese is permitted. Seems like the prohibited substance, we're too far away from it for it to render the cheese prohibited. But if it is curdled with the sap of unripe figs, then it is prohibited because the sap is considered the fruit. Torah says no fruit from the first 3 years of growth of a fruit tree. Sap from that tree might not be prohibited according to this view. The Gemara raises difficulty against the last two suggested reasons for the decree of the sages saying that the cheese of idolaters is prohibited. According to both Rav Chisda, who holds that the cheese is prohibited because it is curdled with vinegar made from the wine of idolaters, and according to Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak, who maintains that it is prohibited because it is curdled with the sap of orla, one should be prohibited from deriving benefit from the cheese, as one may not derive benefit from either the wine of Gentiles nor from orla. And the Gemara concludes, indeed, this is difficult. Rav Nachman, the son of Rav Chisda, interpreted a verse homiletically. What is the meaning of that which is written, your ointments have a goodly fragrance? From the Song of Songs 1:3, this is a metaphor for a Torah scholar. To what is a Torah scholar comparable? To a flask of palatin. When it is exposed, its scent diffuses. When it is covered, its scent does not diffuse. So the Gemara remarks, and moreover, when a Torah scholar spreads his knowledge, matters that are generally hidden from him are revealed to him. As it is stated, maidens, alamot, love you. And one may read into the verse, the hidden, alumot, and moreover, the angel of death loves him. As it is stated, maidens, alamot, love you. And one may read into the verse, the one appointed over death, almot, loves you. And moreover, as Torah scholar inherits two worlds, one in this world and the other one in the world to come, as it is stated, maidens, alamot, love you. And one may read into those words, worlds, olamot, right? So as you can expect, according to, the sages will teach us in many times, in many ways, in many different ways, the great rewards for immersing ourselves in Torah, and truly Torah study and all mitzvahs, especially deeds of charity, for example. This is what you can take with you, right? What can you take with you when you leave this world? Not any money that you stored under the mattress, but all the money that you gave to charity, that's yours forever. That's what you can take with you. What you gave away is what you can take with you into the next world. And the Torah that you learned. The Torah that you learned stays with you in the next world. And think, if it's what you learned stays with you, then these sages that have packed just everything of the tradition into their memories, incredible. When they shed the mortal coil, right, and their soul goes to the next world, they're going to have the entire tradition with them. That's why they're going to shoot right to the top and to the front of the heavenly academy, where there's, as far as we know, there's no books up there, no physical books. It's what you bring with you. And all the Torah that you learned, it just becomes a prize, a value, a property. It's property that you can take with you into the next world. Everything that you learned and everything that you taught and everything that you shared and any teaching that you taught to others and that they transmitted to others, especially in your name, that accrues to your merit in the next world. And that concludes our discussion of Mishnah number 4 here in chapter 2. New Mishnah number 5. This Mishnah lists items belonging to an idolater, which it is prohibited to consume, but which it is permitted to derive, but from which it is permitted to derive benefit. Right? So the wine of idolaters, we can't drink it, that's consuming, and we can't sell it or buy it to sell it. Right? We can't trade in it, we can't give it as a gift, we can't get any benefit from it. Right? So that's the prohibition on deriving benefit. In this Mishnah, we're going to look at some substances that belong to idolaters that we're not allowed to consume, but it is permitted to derive benefit from it. Let's see why. What they are and why. So these are the items that belong to idolaters that are prohibited, but their prohibition is not that of an item from which deriving benefit is also prohibited. Milk that was milked by an idolater, and the Jew did not see him performing this action, and their bread and their oil. And the Mishnah notes that Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, Rebbe, and his court permitted the oil of the idolaters entirely. Right? Presumably they didn't use oil as part of their idolatry. So in what way would that oil become corrupted or polluted that a Jew can't consume it? Remember, we can only eat kosher food as Jews. But there are some foods that are out there that come from non-Jews that they're not kosher per se, but they don't need to be kosher, right? So for the most part, you have to check and make sure. I'm not a rabbi, but there's certain foods that we can drink, right? For example, scotch. As long as it was not aged in a wine barrel, scotch doesn't need a hechsher. You can, a Jew, a kosher Jew, a pious Jew, a Hasidic Jew will drink scotch. Again, as long as it was not aged in a wine barrel. There are other kinds of alcohols that we would require the kosher certification on them. But so here they're arguing about that kind of a food where, is it going to remain permitted even though it comes from an idolater, was in the possession of an idolater. Now the Mishnah resumes its list. But these were not, right? Oil here on this list, according to Rebbe, you could consume it. But according to the Mishnah, the anonymous opinion of this Mishnah that we follow, you cannot, right? You cannot consume that oil. You could buy and sell it, but you can't consume it, right? This is the list we cannot consume, but we can benefit from. And boiled and pickled vegetables, whose usual manner of preparation involves adding wine and vinegar to them, and minced tarit, and brine that does not have a kilbit fish floating in it, and chilak, and a sliver of hiltit, and salkondit salt. All these are prohibited for consumption, but their prohibition is not that of an item from which deriving benefit is prohibited. You can't eat these things, but you can buy and sell them. Whereas an apple, right? An apple, just raw produce, you could buy that from an idolater, and it would be permitted for consumption and, of course, for deriving benefit. Now the Gemara in this Mishnah. Concerning milk, with regard to what need we be concerned? Why is the milk prohibited for consumption? If it is due to the concern that the idolater might exchange the milk of a kosher animal with the milk of a non-kosher animal, well, this concern is unfounded, as kosher milk is white, whereas non-kosher milk has a green tinge to it. And therefore, they are easily distinguishable. And if it is prohibited due to the concern that it might be mixed with non-kosher milk, let the Jew curdle the milk obtained from the idolater. As the master said, milk from a kosher animal curdles, but milk from a non-kosher animal does not curdle. I don't know about that. Maybe it's true. Maybe it was definitely, I'm sure it was true then, in that part of the world with the animals that they were talking about. But maybe there's milk from non-kosher animals that does not curdle in this manner. The Gemara answers, if one desires to eat it as cheese, indeed, one can simply curdle it, as the milk of non-kosher animals does not curdle. But with what are we dealing here? We are dealing with a case where one desires to use the milk in kamcha, also known as kutach, a food item that contains milk. This is a dip, right? A dip that includes milk and some curdled milk, I guess, that we use as a dip. And the Gemara raises a difficulty, but in that case, let him take a bit of milk and curdle it to test whether or not it had been mixed with the milk of a non-kosher animal. If it curdles completely, it is kosher. If some milk is left over, it is not. And the Gemara explains, since there is also whey in kosher milk, which does not curdle, there is no way to establish the halakhic matter with regard to it. Even kosher milk will not curdle completely, and therefore this is not a reliable method to determine the halakhic status of the milk. So the Gemara presents an alternative suggestion, and if you wish, say instead that you may even say that the concern applies where he intends to use the milk to make cheese, as there is milk that remains between the crevices of curdled cheese, and therefore there is a concern that drops of non-kosher milk might be mixed with it. Now the Mishnah taught, and bread belonging to idolaters is prohibited for consumption. And Rav Kahana says that Rabbi Yochanan says, unlike oil, bread was not permitted by a court. And the Gemara asks, from the fact that Rabbi Yochanan states that bread was not permitted in court, can it be inferred that there is a different opinion that claims that a court did permit it? And the Gemara answers yes, as when Rav Dimi came from the land of Israel to Bavel, he said once Rebbe went out to the field and an idolater brought him a seah of bread, baked in a large baker's oven. And Rebbe said, how exquisite is this loaf of bread? So what did the sages see that caused them to prohibit it? And the Gemara asks incredulously, what did the sages see that caused them to prohibit it? It was prohibited due to the concern that Jews might befriend idolaters while breaking bread with them, which could lead to marriage with idolaters. Intermarriage, no good for Jews. Then they assimilate and they leave being Jewish and being Torah Jews. Right? So it's not that there's a problem with the bread of the idolaters because it's not used in their idolatry and it's not going to be mixed with some non-kosher food, but it's still prohibited by the sages because they didn't want the Jews intermingling with the idolaters. We already talked about earlier in this tractate that at that time that was a very dangerous practice. The idolaters were suspected at all times of idolatry, bloodshed, and prohibited sexual practices. So yeah, we did not want to intermingle with them. And if the concern is intermarriage, then even if non-Jews today, do not practice idolatry and do not practice murder and do not practice prohibited sexual practices, we still are very concerned about intermarriage. Jews need to marry Jews. The Gemara explains that Rebbe was not asking why bread was prohibited in general. Rather, he asked, what did the sages see that caused them to prohibit bread even in the field, where this concern does not apply? And the Gemara notes that upon hearing of this incident, the people thought that Rebbe permitted the bread of the idolaters, but that is not so. Rebbe did not actually permit such bread. And this is why Rabbi Yochanan emphasized that the bread of idolaters was never permitted by Rebbe's court, right? What was the incident? He didn't eat the bread. He said, how charming is this bread? How lovely is this bread? What a beautiful aroma has this bread. He didn't eat it. He was just paying a compliment to his neighbors. The Gemara, and by the way, this is what we learn elsewhere in the Talmud, that when we're in that situation, we have friends who are not Jewish and they're eating a food that we cannot eat, right? And then we're not supposed to say, I don't really like that. That's not what we say. What we're supposed to say in that situation is, wow, that smells really good. I bet it's delicious. But what can I do? My Father in heaven prohibited that food to me because I'm a Torah Jew. That's what we learn elsewhere in the Talmud. I forget the page and tractate, but that's the answer we're meant to give when we have to excuse ourselves from eating something. Not that we don't like it, it's that we are not permitted to eat it. The Gemara records an alternate version of this episode. Rav Yosef, and some say Rav Shmuel Bar Yehuda, says the incident did not occur in this manner. Rather, they said, once Rebbe went to a certain place and he saw that bread was scarce for the students in the study hall. So Rebbe said, is there no baker here who can prepare bread? And upon hearing of this incident, the people thought to say that Rebbe was referring to a baker from among the idolaters, a non-Jewish baker, which would indicate that the bread baked by a professional baker is permitted even if he is an idolater. But in reality, Rebbe stated this question only in reference to a Jewish baker. I'm almost done. Questions or comments, please get them in now. The Gemara cites two qualifications of the leniency that people inferred from the above incident. Rabbi Chelbo said, even according to the one who thought to say that Rebbe was referring to a baker from among the idolaters, we said that the bread is permitted only in a location where there is no Jewish baker. But in a place where there is a Jewish baker, the leniency would certainly not apply. And Rebbe said, even according to the one who thought to say that Rebbe was referring to a baker from the idolaters, that statement applies only in the field, but in the city it would not apply, and the bread would still be prohibited due to the possibility of intermarriage with the idolaters. Now remember, this is the situation that has existed in ancient times. Now, things are quite different. Now, we only eat bread that has a heksher, right? That is certified kosher. And if it's not certified kosher, we don't eat it, right? And what's going to render it certified kosher is that there's kosher supervision. What is the concern with bread? Very interesting. The concern with bread is that it might have dairy in it. That would render bread not kosher. Why? It could be made with kosher milk. Why would having any dairy baked into the bread render it not kosher? Because we might come to eat that bread with meat and with gravy. And then we would have violated the prohibition of eating meat and dairy together, right? So kosher bread never has whey in it. And that's one of those important requirements. And the Gemara relates, Ivu would bite and eat the bread of idolaters at the boundaries of the fields. And Rava said to the students in the study hall, and some say that it was Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak who said to them, do not speak with Ivu, as he eats bread of Arameans in deliberate violation of a rabbinic decree. This would be some kind of a learned Jew who, has ideas of his own about what the law should or shouldn't be. And therefore, he takes it upon himself to practice Judaism outside the decrees of the sages. That's not Judaism. That's not Judaism. Yeah. According to our tradition, as we're learning it here. That's what I've got for us today. I'm not seeing any questions on this document. I'll just babble for 10 seconds, but I'm assuming there are no questions. But at any rate, that's what I've got for us today. I confess I'm exhausted. We had 3 Q&As yesterday in Encino. That's always just exhausting, talking to an audience and doing it 3 times, after 3 different showings of the movie. And thank God the houses were full. We really did great at the LA screenings. And then we drove late last night down to Irvine. So we were halfway to San Diego. And then I was on television in San Diego this morning. I had to get up at 5 to be on the air at 7. And then we came back and we had to do more work, getting some materials ready for marketing that's going out this week. And now that this class is over, I'm just going to kind of go collapse. It's great learning with you, my holy sisters and brothers. And with God's help, we'll be together again tomorrow, Tuesday, the regular Tuesday time, 6 p.m. Pacific. Have a great night.